So thanks for coming. It's great to see so many here. And it was good if you went to Tim's talk and about the MOD and what they've been trying to do. This is it in action and how you do it. That's what this case study is about this morning. We'll talk a little bit about that a bit more later on. So just to introduce myself, I see lots of familiar faces in the crowd, so that's good. But for those who don't know me, I'm Rod Whiting. So I work for Faithful+Gould. I'm a regional director based in the Bristol office, and I'm head of project controls for the West region. I've been doing project controls for about 35 years now, believe it or not. And let's say we've been doing some work with Tata. But I'll hand over to Christian. He can introduce himself.
Okay, just to echo Rod's comments then, thanks for attending this session and being here for our talk. I'm Christian Burge, Head of Project Controls at Tata Steel UK. Engineering background, specifically in metallurgy and material science. Taken the leap into the project controls world around 12 to 18 months ago. And hence the talk today around how we've tried to establish a project controls function within Tata and how we continue to pursue that over the next few months and years.
Okay, so that's us. So just a quick one about Faithful+Gould. So project controls for Faithful+Gould isn't a new thing. It's something that we've been doing for decades. So we're one of the world's leading project and program management consultants, and project controls is very much one of our core sort of service deliveries. So we've got a lot of experience in it, and hence, must remember to click. That's us, yeah, too many clicks. So that's what we do. So like I say, we're very well versed, very experienced, and that's how we got involved with Tata.
Okay, Tata Steel in the UK, I suspect most people know what Tata Steel do. We make steel. That is our prime function and our reason we turn up to work. I work within the project department and capital investment department. So within the site and the works, over time we've had a good understanding of how to deliver projects and what that looks like. But for me, where we've lacked is the sort of element of project controls. And for us in the steel industry, it was probably something new that few people understood what project controls was. And then fewer people understood how to implement and deploy robust project controls. So when you look at how we invest and the amount we invest across the UK, as a project department, it was important for us to get some control around how we deliver these projects to ensure that we are meeting cost, time, parameters and bringing in projects when we should bring them in. So the control element was all about engaging with Faithful+Gould and trying to understand how we implement that into our project processes and into our project life cycle, right from concept through to implementation and handover and closeout.
So the reason I thought it'd be a good subject for the talk is I've been to the expo for a number of years, and there's always lots of great talks, and there's lots of great products out there. But I don't think there's ever been a talk about how you bring all these things together to make a difference. Okay, so this is what this talk's really about. So we know that it's not just about having a great piece of software. That alone won't help any company to deliver its projects to cost and to time. It's more than that. So that's why I thought it'd be a really good case study in actually what that looks like in the real world.
Yeah. And for me, I think we recognised that whilst we're delivering large capital schemes, there's a project control element that we were lacking in terms of understanding and experience. So, to help us sort of position our controls and build that into our processes, it was all around engaging the market and seeing how a managed service provision and a managed service could come in and help us do that. Because as I said earlier, we have project managers, we have good project engineers, but pulling that all together in a support controlled function, I think that's the aspect we were missing. So hence the start of our journey and the engagement with project controls.
Yeah, so that's what it's about this morning. So this is all about how you take a company from where it is and how you get to the place where you're implementing good, sound, best practice project controls, and how you do that. And this is a worked example. So.
Okay, so for me it was all about trying to start a journey. It was all about trying to explain to people, right, we deliver in large project schemes, so how do we deliver them in a better, more efficient way? So for us, the journey really started about 12 months ago. I came offline from an engineering role and sort of took on a central project controls lead role to implement project controls. You'll see on the slide there that our investment profile has sort of changed slightly over the last 12 to 18 months, whereby we were originally looking sort of 2 years ahead based on our position in the UK of spending sort of 45-50 million per annum in terms of our capex. That changed quite significantly from 45 to 50 to 100 with the sort of announcement of Tata remaining in the UK and the need then to invest in our asset base so we could perform as a UK operation. So there were a number of steps that we needed to undertake to move from investing at 50 million to investing at 100 million. And one of those steps you'll see on the slide on the screen is point 3. You know, we recognise that deployment of project controls was key to us delivering that end game, if you like, along with some other stuff as well. But the project controls part of it is key to allow us to move towards that safe delivery of CapEx schemes, where we are bringing in schemes to time, to budget, and to quality parameters.
Okay, so one of the first things that we had to establish and make sure we put in place, so there's some of the foundations of good project controls. You may have already heard this if you're in the other talks, but the first one is very much having the right people, okay? You can have a good system, you can have good processes, but you must have the right people. So what I mean by that are people that are experienced in project controls at the appropriate level and levels. So you want a good pipeline of staff with various levels of experience. They need to be, the behaviours is probably, as we know, one of the most important things. We want proactive individuals. We don't want, one of the phrases you might have come across is software jockeys. Yeah, we want people who want to get up, get at their desk, go and find out what's going out on the project, speaking to project managers, not just sitting there trying to receive. And also we want to recognise that and make sure that their qualifications in their career reflects the level of competence that they've got to as well. So you want to make sure that you're supporting them in their sort of career development. But obviously, even when you've got good people, you must have the right tools. And obviously, there's lots of products and things being advertised today that we can use as project controls professionals. Again, getting away from people just using their own fag packets and spreadsheets that they've just developed themselves. Again, we want to get to some standardization there, as we've heard already this morning. And again, having the right procedures. So again, standard procedures. This is how we do things. This is what you do. This is some of the different levels of documentation for different people. Very, very important.
Okay, Rod touches on the tools and procedures which are important, as we all know. And for us, it was all about sort of modifying and enhancing what we had. We had a level of tool sets, but the use of those tool sets was sort of sporadic, and the quality of those tool sets was something questionable. So obviously, Rod and the F&G team come in to help us with that. A bigger one for me was culture. So how do we move our guys within the project delivery department, within the CapEx environment? How do we move them into a space where they, first of all, accepted project controls, and then sort of understood how to deploy and work with it? Because the culture part is, I'm a PM and I know what I'm doing. You don't need to give me data and tell me how my project's doing. So breaking those barriers down, I think, was one of the first and hardest steps, and it continues to be a battle, but we are sort of working through that and trying to address it, week on week, month on month, and we get in there. It's a shift of attitude. People's mindset has now changed because they see the value of what project controls can bring. And the sort of one version of the truth that we are now working with, rather than sometimes having a subjective and maybe an emotional view on things. And the last point on the slide there for me was, within our WBS structure, our processes within projects, being a top-tier coma site, there are things that we have to do. There is a hazard study process that we have to undertake and abide by, and that's all around inherent safety design. So it's right from concept through to handover and closeout. It's understanding the management of change, the HAZOP, the LOPA study requirement, from putting in a machine to dismantling something and putting in a new line, a new blast furnace. It's understanding the effects on process safety and the safety of that kit going in. So for us, it helps drive the mandatory compliance with some of our stuff that sits in the project manual. So it's supporting that manner as well.
And the other one around culture is, again, getting the company to accept that having project reports that aren't all green, that you have some reds and ambers on, isn't a bad thing. What you want to see is what the actual situation is. So is, again, people being comfortable with giving what's, may have been perceived as bad news when it's not. It's all about giving the correct information. So, building on those fundamentals then, are this key sort of principle of integration. So we want to talk about that a little bit. Again, one of the things quite often when you come into an organisation is things are very fragmented. People are doing things their own way. Schedules don't talk to each other and stuff like that. So what you need to do, and what we've been doing, is get into a place where all the systems talk to each other. So that milestone that you put in P6 is the one that appears on the project report, but it also appears on the the high-level management reports as well, if that's a critical milestone. So you're not sort of having the handball information around any more than you have to is a key. And then on that integration is where we've got those 5 key disciplines that you may work in, some or all of these. So estimating, so again, having a system that gives you a good idea how much something's going to cost before you do it. Your planning and your scheduling, how long is it going to take before we do it? That then handing into cost management. Is it still going to cost that? How much is it going to cost? Where are we going with that? Risk management. Okay, what might go wrong? What might go better as well? And then change management. So again, all those things coming together, being interrelated and connected, and then just reporting should be almost for free to some extent. Okay, you don't want to have any more effort than you need in the reports coming out. They should just come out from the data in the tool sets. That's where we get to. So, how do you make that happen? How do you get there? Okay.
Just one for me to add to what Rod has said there is the 5 key disciplines we talk about that you see in the centre of the screen. They were there within our project systems and our approach. We're aligned to APM. We have a project manual and a WBS structure, and it just goes back to what I said earlier. They were there, but when you look at the sort of integrated baseline review assessment that we did, the processes were either inadequate, not up to standard in some areas, or the uptake and use of them was low. So it was all about reinvigorating people around, this is the right thing to do. These are the right areas that we need to work around to deliver projects. Now, how do we do it consistently across all our teams on every project? And that's the integration bit for me, and bringing the expertise from outside is how do we now go and do that and make that business as usual for all our project teams. Another one for me was the peer check. So we have a hub in the UK with lots of downstream units. We have a hub in mainland Europe, in IJmuiden, who have sort of worked and developed project controls from probably a bit earlier stage than we have. So they're a bit more mature in how they deploy project controls. So the peer check with our IJmuiden colleagues in mainland Europe was a good sort of yardstick to say we're on the right track. We're going down the right path, and it's a nice sanity check to sort of soundboard what you're doing.
Yeah. I think they even said you'd leapfrogged them, haven't you? Which was good. So this is the process that we're going to look at. So it's a standard approach that we in F&G have developed, and these sort of phases that we go through to take a company from where it is to where it needs to be. So that's what we're going to be talking about a bit more now. Okay, and I don't know what keeps flicking on. So just to give you a timeline for that, I think, Christian, you want to just go through.
Yeah, so as I said earlier, it's sort of kicked off in earnest about 12 months ago for us within the project department. So, you know, we looked at an integrated baseline review or a maturity analysis, whatever you want to call it, around September last year. So we were sort of September to December, 3 months, understanding, right, what have we got? What's best practice, and how do we plug the gaps? How do we get there? And we sort of undertook a lot of stakeholder interviews, not only within project engineering, but with our finance functions, senior management team, procurement colleagues, so really to get a feel for what the business felt we were doing within projects, how we were delivering them. So that gave us a sort of yardstick of where we were. The transition phase then, we sort of commenced that turn of the year, January time. January to April, where we tried to transition and set up a project controls function. So if anybody was at Tim's talk earlier, it's all around the sort of branding of project controls, making people aware of what project controls is, what it can do, what it can offer. So that was the transition period. And then we sort of called the next phase implementation. So how do we then implement this in an organization which has in the past been reluctant to change in some areas? You know, change is difficult. So how would you then go and implement it? So that phase for us was sort of May to September, where we picked a lot of pilot trials, a lot of projects where we would sort of trial certain things, trial a P6 plan, trial the use of a cost tool, trial some risk workshops on certain projects. So that's gone well. And now we're into deployment, which is all around how do we now get all our projects working in the same way. Naturally, some projects will just fall off due to the phase of where they're at, so they won't uptake some of the new processes. All the new emerging projects will, and there's some in between that we have to make a call on what we introduce and what we don't. So that task is ongoing and will be ongoing for some time. So that's just a bit of a brief sort of description of the journey over the last 12 months that we've tried to enact.
So it just gives you the sort of timescale that you can do this in, if you engage with the right people, obviously. So if we go through each of those in a little bit more detail. So that benchmarking exercise that was done is something that we've got in Faithful+Gould. It's a sort of maturity model. And just say, well, I think we've got a light version of that. So if you're a company and you want to see how you score, then come along. I think it's working. Alex? Is it working? Is Alex here? Yeah, it's all good. So if you come to the F&G stand after, we've got a light version of this that you can test yourself. So what we do is across a number of the key areas, we've got some criteria that we can ask you questions so we can see where you are. So things around, you know, a change process. Is it just a record of the past? Or is it being actively used to manage decisions about what you need to do? Risk registers, if you do them at all, do they just live in a drawer, never to see the light of day again? Or are you using them to actually manage risk on your project? So we've got these kind of questions that enable us then to benchmark where you are. Which is the generic one on the side. So then you've got the one over there, which is actually the results of the analysis that I did with Tata at the back end of last year. And just to sort of say to Christian, he knows this, that people were very honest. The other thing with this, when you do this exercise, you need to get the people to tell you what the actual situation is, not what they think the right answer is. You know, don't say everything's wonderful when it's not.
Yeah, and I think Rod's right. So, you know, at the start of this process, what the communication was that, look, let's understand where we are in terms of our systems and processes. Let's be honest so that we get the right feedback. Once we understand that baseline, we can then look at how to plug the gaps. And I think whilst most people recognise a lot of the terminology around work breakdown structures and cost breakdown structures and planning and scheduling and estimating. Again, I go back to the process and the uptake of it. You know, the process may have been there and aligned to APM, but who's actually using it and who's recognizing the need to use it. So for us, it was about, that's where we are. Just accept where we are in terms of project controls, and let's make a plan in terms of how we move forward and improve. So you'll see on the screen the maturity analysis sort of approach, which is top left, and the results that come out initially for us on the bottom right. So, you know, some work to do for us to move towards a benchmark position.
Okay, so that's where we've moved on from. So like I say, that took about a month to do that. So following that, we moved into the transition phase, which like I say was about another 3-month period. So one of the things that we were quite keen to do was to sort out the documentation that Tata had. So what you don't want, let's just go back. I think it's because we keep mucking around with our notes there, so apologies for that. What you don't want is one huge tome to cover your project controls, because nobody ever reads it. It can be a lot of detail for people who don't need to know it. So what we recommend, we've got some vanilla documents that we use, procedures and guidance notes, but what we do is we adapt those then for the client. So that's why it doesn't take years to do this stuff. So we produce a high-level handbook, which is around the principles of project controls across the full range of why we're doing it. We then do procedures for each of the key disciplines. So that goes into a bit more detail for what you need to do step by step during the sort of monthly process or setting up that baseline in the first place. And then we do another set of documents, which are the guidance notes, which are the things that are the screenshots, the dummy guides that you can use for your training, plus bringing people in and just sort of crib notes for folks. So that's the sort of documentation that we then put in place.
So the tool set then was very much for us, build, modify, or improve. So do we have existing tool set? Is it good enough? If it's not, how do we build it? How do we improve it? How do we get to a position where we are using industry norms, benchmarking sort of approaches with some of our tools? Once we agree a tool set, is then people got to use it. So how do then we communicate that tool is the right tool for its use? And that's spread across the 5 key disciplines as you see there: planning, estimating, etc., etc. So one of the big shifts for us was moving from MSP to P6. Again, a big cultural shift, because people are recognizing, use MSP for years, then you're trying to introduce P6. So you know, it's a cultural change. You've got to communicate that right and correctly, but that's the path we are now moving down, along with some of the other stuff as well. The resource plan. So what we did was we needed to understand what resource we had, what we didn't have. We were lacking in terms of project controls expertise. A lot of people didn't understand what project controls was. So hence the engagement with the managed service through Faithful+Gould to bring in the right competent people to help lead and develop some of the work we're doing, but also upskill some of our own staff. So you get that balanced mix of bought-in resource and an upskilled team that we can then push forward. And as part of that resource plan is a strategy document of how we enact that through the next couple of months.
One of the other things that we developed during this phase was the training packages. So we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide, but it was very much having, again, different types of training depending on who the audience was. So it's appropriate, again.
And so reporting for me, Rod mentioned earlier, reporting is an output. It should be a free thing that is generated if you're operating correctly. And what we've sort of moved towards is standard reporting, so that every capital project is reporting in the same way. People recognize that is a capital project report, and then we use that then to report up in the business as well at more senior levels, creating common dashboards. So prior to this exercise, there was inconsistencies of how people reported. They did what they like, you know, what feels comfortable to them. Now we've sort of introduced a consistent way of reporting around key metrics with supporting commentary, so that on a dashboard level in senior sessions, it's easier to convey messages and support and issues and problems rather than it being a bit disjointed. Okay.
One of the other things we sort of jumped on as well is it was the SAP system that Tata got. So they'd had it in, but they weren't using a lot of the functionality. They weren't even aware of some of the functionality that was available. So again, from our experience, we were able to suggest some improvements. So again, not changing the configuration, but just using some of the things that they already had. For instance, exploring, putting forecasting into SAP. It wasn't being done at that time. And then, very importantly, again, getting the project controls arrangements for that supply base. So what we also developed, so as well as the documentation, the procedures and the tools to be used within Tata, we've got a mini version of that, which we use with the supply base. So it goes out with the tender inquiry, what we expect from them. So we expect a schedule baselined, cost loaded, so that they can also then report earned value. We want a standard cost report that we've got laid out, so it's showing us all the things that we need to know. So it's a mini version of that. Along with that, we will, if necessary, if it's new to a supplier, we will even train them. We'll help them do it because it benefits the project overall. It's just trying to get that, you're part of the team. So that's something that we developed at that point in time. So that was that 3 months. Then we moved on to the implementation, which mainly was around the training piece. So these were the different training packages that we pulled together. So we did an awareness session. So this is where everybody who's involved in projects goes on this one. So if you're a dock controller, an administrator, engineers, designers, project managers, construction coordinators, everybody goes on the awareness training. So we did about 100 folk from the office in sort of group sessions of 10. We do a session which would be about half a day on the setting the baseline, and then another follow-up session around then controlling against the baseline. So that was for everybody. Then for those who were the project controls professionals, we would do the practitioner training, which is we either do it in groups, say with the planners, or we do one-to-ones with the individuals so that they can start getting familiar with the tools if they've not used them before, or if they have, just how we're going to use it at Tata. So there was that level. We've also created some sort of cut-down versions of the training as well for the finance department. So again, some of the particular things that they'll be interested around the forecasting. So we go into that in a little bit of detail so they can get confidence that the figures that we give, that's the ones that we expect to be reported. We don't want people, one department saying a project's going to cost this, and another project, the project says, I don't recognise that, that's not my forecast. So we explained how that worked. And again, with the procurement team, so how we were going to interface and support procurement. So again, with the tendering process, that ongoing interaction then with the suppliers through procurement. So we're not taking anything away from them, but we're supporting them. So we've got a training package specifically for that department as well.
And the training was really important for me. So the awareness training, probably more than anything, to sort of convey the message of this is project controls. It's a new way of working within projects to support project delivery to time and cost and quality. So it was making people aware, getting the message out, and making them understand why project controls was coming in. So that was a really good piece of work for me. And then, as Rod mentioned, some of the abridged versions of training then to keep our procurement and our service functions involved as well, finance, etc., to understand their role in the puzzle as well. And the last one on there is the e-learning module. So we've created an e-learning module now within Tata, all around project controls, with an assessment at the end. So, we can roll it out to all our engineers and staff within projects so they get a first feel of what project controls is and how we go about deploying it. As part of the training, you'll see the little picture of the handbook on the right-hand side. It's a sort of pocket project controls book. You can stick it in your pocket and stick it in on your desk, etc., which just helped sort of crystallize and pull together all the sort of stuff we were doing in a sort of concise and easy to read format. So people sort of had that reference, quick to hand, as they went back into the workplace.
And obviously one of the things we're very keen to do is get the feedback. So during each session we'd ask for feedback so we can make sure the sort of next sessions were even better. And you can see the graphics. So we were very, very pleased with the level of engagement, but also that the training was hitting the mark. You can see that from the scores that we got. So that was that 3-month period, which led us on then to deployment.
Okay, so for me, it was, and this is the key part for me, is how do you deploy something new? It's a change. How do you, you may have done all the upfront sort of systems governance bit, but if it stays as that and nobody uses it, then we haven't done our job. So it was all about creating a strategy together with Faithful+Gould. So what does that look like in terms of expertise, in terms of resource, in terms of a time frame? What does the mix of bought-in resource look like versus our existing capability? So that's all pulled together in a strategy-style document that we sort of presented to the business in terms of how we were going to deploy project controls going forward. So that was a good approach for me. And then we sort of looked at, well, what does our resource profile look like? So the center of the slide, you'll see a sort of resource histogram. The sort of red section is our core aspiration position in terms of what we need. The blue line on the graph is probably where we are currently with FTEs. So you can see there's a gap to the core manning that we need. And then beyond that, into the sort of green and the purple sections, is the sort of flex and sort of support services that we need as well. So, in terms of delivering 100 million for us per annum, there's a bit of a resource gap. Hence, we have to pull in some expertise from outside to support that. So that was all around making it visible to the business. You want us to deliver 100 million, we're going to do it, but we're going to do it in this fashion with this split of resource. And that's a mix of UK hires, that's a mix of bought-in managed service and engineering partners as well, engagement with engineering partners. So again, strategy, resource, deployment. You'll see the P6 view on the screen, you won't see the detail, but it's all around how do we then deploy the project controls principles in all the projects that we're doing. So we've got a P6 plan around that to help us, well, when do they come in? What phases of the project do these come in? And when do they start? So it helps project teams to understand how that becomes practical.
So what that looked like in project controls space then. We've got the structure there over on the side that Christian's talking about.
Okay, so, for us is, and I mentioned earlier, well, what does the structure look like? So we have a transition team, we have a core team supporting centrally, and then we need people in projects, within project teams. So for us, and you probably can't see the detail, but on the two larger columns, it was all about a deployment of planners and a deployment of cost engineers, if you like, with some ad hoc risk support as required. So it was recognizing the level of that support across our portfolio so that each project, as I keep mentioning, gets the same consistent project control message and deployment every time we take on a new project, deliver an existing one, finish an old one. So the structure's there, and then it moves into the different phases on the pyramid you see.
Yeah, so during the first two phases, it's really important to have a separate team, your transition team, because you can't expect the people that are doing the delivery to do this sort of transformation piece at the same time. So there was that transition team, which obviously now has been disbanded. We don't need that. We're into core support and delivery now. Yep. One of the other things that we do and we recommend is in the early days, we do tend to be quite top heavy in as much as we have more seniors and practitioners. But then as we move into a more mature space, is we can then go for a proper pyramid approach where we'll have seniors with some practitioners and then some trainees supporting that. So that generates good value for the client. It also means that we've got, we can deploy all our staff and there's some development for them as well. So that's the way you want to be moving.
Okay, and I think a key one for me then was around, how do we maximise our investment? We're quite constrained in our capex budgets. We'd want double the amount if we could get it. We have a large asset base in the steel industry, big heavy industry with large, heavy maintained assets that are aging in areas as well. So, we want more capex than we can get. So how do you make your capex go further? And this was all about project control supporting that. So, and getting teams to understand contingency and how we manage contingency. So if we don't realise a risk in the project and that risk is now past, then we can say, well, the cost of not realising that risk is A, and we feel comfortable giving part of that cost back. Whereas, that's a sort of mature way to approach risk in a project, which was lacking probably previously. So, it's changing people's mindsets. It's getting them to think differently on a sort of program and portfolio level as well. Because if there's spare money on a project that somebody wants to spend to paint the building or do something to the office, then more holistically on a portfolio level, there's better use of that money. So people's mindsets are changing in terms of how we manage capital and how we manage budgets and risk for that matter. Okay.
So, just moving on then to reporting. We want to talk a little bit about that. We need to let everyone know what the state of the projects in the portfolio is. So we've developed the reporting cycle as well now.
Okay, so for me it was all about, so if you look at the right-hand side of the screen, it was what do we want to report and when. So for me it was, we've got some key meetings within our monthly governance. We have a sort of senior management meeting, second Wednesday of the month. Prior to that, we have a project board meeting where we bring all our project managers into one session across one day. We have a 20-30 minute update using a consistent project controls template format. They get 20-30 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever they require to update on their projects. We get that feel of the portfolio going into the sort of second Wednesday. So that was the sort of position that I gave to Rod and the team, and we need a reporting cycle that actually works for us moving into those meetings. So going to the left of the slide, Rod can explain then how that works.
Yeah, so that's how we make it happen, really. So one of the things, obviously, working back this way, is at some point you need to freeze the data, okay, so that everyone knows that's what we're reporting on, rather than it be the live data, which is constantly changing. Yeah. So to do that, we work off the back of our the finance system closure, SAP in this case, and then before that, so mid-month, is when we start doing the report cycle. So that's where we'll start gathering the data so that we can present it to the project managers. It can be reviewed by the team. If there's any messages, any variances that we need to understand, so that we can then, they can put the commentary on the reports so that they can then explain it to, like I say, to the senior managers. So that's kind of the cycle. Get the data right, put it up to the reports, see what the answers are, put in the explanation. So any issues, what's the issue, what you're doing about it, do you need any support?
Okay, and on the screen there, you just see some outputs or some shots of outputs that are generated supporting these meetings. So from the top left of the slide, you'll see a one-page template that we've generated as a consistent reporting suite. We use that then to automate into a dashboard that you see on the middle of the slide, and that's sort of progressed again now into a more automated version using Excel. So I suppose for me, the frequency, the governance, the cadence of how we get people to focus on how their projects are performing, and then how we manage that message to the business is vastly improved. And it's something that is iterative for me. We're always working to improve it and develop it as time goes on. But in terms of structure, governance, reporting, that has vastly improved through some of these processes.
Yeah, and like I say, automation's the key. Single source of the truth, no surprises. Those are the sort of mantras of the reporting. So,
okay, so in summary for me, when we sort of first started thinking about project controls, it was why project controls and for what reason. At the start we said we would start and begin project controls in the hub, which is Port Talbot and integrated works, and then we would want to deploy that approach across the UK. And it's just a map on the slide there of some of our sites, our integrated site and our downstream units. So the vision is that project controls will start in the hub in Port Talbot. We will roll out the processes UK-wide. And essentially, what are we doing? You know, we're supplying some high-tech, high-grade steels into the automotive industry, you know, for success through the automotive supply chain. So we're a steel maker, but we want to do that in the best possible way. We've got some big capital spend, and to be good in our capital space and our capital environment, we have to be robust around project controls. So, yeah, for me.
So that's it. So we're around all day. So I think we've got 5 minutes for questions, but we'll also, after, we'll both rock around to the F&G stand as well, if you want any more questions. But happy to take any now if you've got any. The culture change, yeah. So I think one of the key things is we did a lot of communication up front. So it's that sort of principle. We're going to tell you something. We'll tell them, and then we tell you that we told you, but also just trying to make people understand that it was actually they were going to benefit from it, depending who it was. So, you know, we'd ask the project managers, you know, have you got any spare time? Are you busy? Yes, we're very busy. Right, okay, well, you don't need to be doing that yourself. This is stuff that we can do for you. So it allows you to do more project management. It allows you to do more engineering. So it was kind of them getting that message. So it was handing over a bit of control, you know, so sometimes they felt a bit like that, but when they realised and got that it would free up time, that was a big one.
And the culture thing for me is it's an ongoing thing. Oh, so there's people still not on board, and there's still battles. I won't stand here and say everybody's shouting about project controls and totally on board, because they're not. But it's a journey for us, and the more people that see the benefits, the more pilot stuff we do in projects, the easier it is to sell. So that challenge is ongoing, and it'll continue to be a challenge, but it's a good one. You know, it's change is good, and you know, that's what we're trying to bring in.
Okay, well, I think time's up, so we'll hang around here for a little bit to answer any questions as well. But thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you.